this Angel's Envy out of the picture now that we're
yeah.
rolling.
Put that down
Put
there.
that down on the floor. We're going to do a little Antique 107 from Weller today. I'm pumped for this. Have never tried it, although I've sold numerous bottles. This little bad boy, along with some of those behind us, if you're watching this on YouTube and not just listening to it on the podcast, Big Night Wednesday the 15th, that's men's night in downtown Manistee, and we're going to have a bourbon sale down here at Manistee Beverage. So today Danny.
He hasn't had any yet.
Yeah, I promise. Danny's going to educate me on a little bit of Weller. So fire away, my man.
So this, I only had it just recently. I mean, it's hard to find. But it would be an understatement to say it blew me away. It was very, very good. I generally am skeptical of the hard to find bottles. I've had some and they're very good, but you almost want to keep your reserves and not get too excited.
Sure.
Because then you end up hunting them and you get frustrated. So this one, I'm a little upset now that I've tried it because I'm going to be looking all over for it. So I got some facts and a little bit of story time first. I know that people like that last time. So Weller Antique 107 is 107 proof. It's 53.5% alcohol. It is a wheated bourbon. So every bourbon, the majority of the mash bill has to be corn. It has to be 51% corn at least. A wheated bourbon just means that the next highest amount of a grain in there is wheat. And then the third one in there is malted barley. So I was surprised there's no rye in there at all. Usually rye gives it the spikiness, the spiciness. So it's very, very smooth. So let me try and get this all right. Antique 107 was originally created by the Stitzel-Weller Distilling Company. The W.L. Weller Distilling Company was named after William LaRue Weller. It was W.L. Weller and Sons. He had a man who also worked for him, whose name was Julian Van Winkle, who would later become known as Pappy Van Winkle.
The one impossible bourbon to get.
Yes, yeah, one of them. Pappy Van Winkle later owned his own distillery called A.P.H. Stitzel Distillery, and then they merged after Weller's death. And so that's why, and they're both produced by Buffalo Trace now. So it's, there's a lot of that's a lot of history to the bourbon companies. So that's how those kind of came together. So the cool thing about this one is that Weller 107 uses the same mash bill, the same warehouse, and the same barrels as old Rip Van Winkle 10 years. So a lot of people say it's like a poor man's Pappy. Poor man's Pappy is what you hear. There's some blends that you can find online where they almost all use this while adding in some other bourbons into a blend to make another drink that's commonly known as poor man's Pappy. Yeah, that worries me, like I said, because I like this a lot, and I'm a little worried because I don't want to have to be hunting down Pappy when for years I've lived in ignorance. Right. So we can get started and get into that nose. So it is very, very, I don't want to say too much before you
put it in my head, because to me, so far, they all kind of have that same signature vanilla, caramel, tomato kind of smell.
Yeah. So I thought this was just a super sweet caramel and vanilla, like way sweeter than normal. Usually it was kind of like vanilla extract is what I would get out of it, and this one is like vanilla icing. Not quite like when I said Woodford Double Oak was like that cream cheese icing. This is like almost like you pop that can open, you bring it home from the store, and it's just that vanilla icing. It's not so creamy as the cream cheese icing. You get a little burnt sugar. And then there's that leather that's in there too. And I never think of myself to say the leather, but once you put it out there, it's like it's very apparent. I did pour one a little bit before we started to let it air out a little, let it breathe. And I don't know, see if you can tell a difference with that. Because when I was kind of writing my notes for this, it takes me a while and I don't drink very quickly. There's a huge difference as this sits for 30 minutes. I've seen some reviews of people. The sharpness of
the alcohol is kind of dissipated in the nose.
And it opens up a lot. Yeah. So that's really, really cool. So I found that, it starts with that very sweet caramel and vanilla, burnt sugar and the leather, and then it kind of moves into cinnamon and butterscotch, and then you start to get some floral notes too. And usually I find it with the rye mash bills and some of the bourbons. That's where a lot of that spiciness, floralness comes from. So you don't get that right away. So that was what shocked me. And the longer it sits, I found it got really into like cherry and honey. I want to watch your reaction on this one because it does come out kicking with that 107 proof, but I felt like you only get that once. It's that first sip that you get that kick of the alcohol, and then that pretty much goes away as you keep sipping it. This is the highest proof one we've had so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I do get the honey. I can appreciate the honey in this for sure.
And it's just crazy how it just comes in kicking with that proof. And then as you just keep sipping it, it gets easier and easier.
So I can appreciate it. The nuance in it, I like. The heat is a bit much for me. Now, would you dilute it with a few drops of water?
I wouldn't. I love this. This is perfect for me. But it is one of those, like, you could easily add a few drops of water and that would open it up, or put it over ice. And this isn't supposed to be a hard-to-find bourbon, and it's not supposed to be an expensive bourbon. I mean, this could be an easily used, mixable bourbon. I would never mix it. Just like I said, it's hard to find. And it's a shame because it's such a really, really nice bourbon. There's a few that just tick all the boxes for me, and this is very much one of them. But yeah, I felt like that aggressiveness in the proof falls away, and it opens up, and you start to get more rich vanilla, brown sugar, and cinnamon. Just kind of a shorter format show we've been doing, but if we were to sit here for 30 minutes, keep sipping, I think you'd come around to it. And this is probably the longest, most satisfying finish I've had on any bourbon.
It definitely changes after the one sip. It's still kind of lingering, the taste and flavors on my tongue.
Just kind of draws out and like evolves. And the biggest thing that popped into my head was like candied nuts. And as it finishes, it kind of draws out and more different things fade away and some things come out. And it's like brown sugar, cinnamon sugar, and you get some spices and some nuts. And some of the bourbons we've had so far.
If you're not sold on this, just by
so
Danny
good,
talking
guys.
to me right now, if you're not sold on this, you don't like bourbon.
It's the long, so a lot of those bourbons that we've had, like even like double oaked, I love, but the finish just drops right off, which is sometimes what you want. But this one is definitely like it just sits, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, and I can see
smoking
a cigar with this.
I don't smoke many cigars, but yeah, this one is
my
one
wife
that
would
would
kill
get me
me
into it.
What else? Do we have any other anecdotes to go along with this?
All I've got to say, it is hard to find. There are other really nice wheated bourbons. Larceny makes a really good bottle. They're full proof, and even just the 92 proof are really nice wheated bourbons. The whole Maker's Mark line is all wheated. So they've got Maker's Mark 46, and the cask strength are all really nice. And a lot of people compare the cask strength to this, and those tend to be a little easier to find. Wyoming whiskey, Wyoming whiskey, I've heard some really nice things about. I've still yet to pick a bottle, but when I do, I'm sure we'll bring it back on the show and have to start pulling some of the related bourbons in, which is a lot of fun. And then Jefferson's Ocean, which is kind of a contentious one. That's kind of a love it or hate it from what I hear.
Look, if it doesn't cross the equator 5 times, I'm not drinking it. Well, I will say this in conclusion, that this is phenomenal, and I would agree with you. I need to grow more into the higher proofs, but I can definitely see the appeal behind this. This bottle of Weller, among some of the ones that are behind us here in the picture, where we've got some Mitchers, some Angel's Envy that I put on the floor at the beginning, some Buffalo Trace, Bourbon Cream, some IW Harper. The list goes on. We're going to have one hell of a big bourbon display and sale for Men's Night on Wednesday the 15th.
It's going to be so good.
It's going to be juicy.
It's going to be a moist night.
He said it, not me. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.